are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for being on the Dessie show.
It is my honor and pleasure. Thank you for just thinking about me. You've been your words are kind as anybody can imagine. Kindness and encouragement goes miles in this season, so I appreciate the opportunity to just talk and listen.
Absolutely. So the reason I wanted to have you on is I recently watched your TED Talk. My wife sent it to me about black murder being normalized, and
Yeah, yeah.
so good. And so I started to do more research about you and kind of checking out your background and things like that. And so I just wanted to connect with you about it. So for those who don't know who you are and what you do, could you kind of tell the audience?
Yeah, so I'm I guess former pastor. I'm still a pastor, but primarily a pastor to pastors. I've been in ministry about 30 something years, and started about a decade ago. Had really looked at issues of, systemic racism, discrimination, long story to it of how I kind of got exposed, but about a decade ago, something clicked in me, and I thought I cannot be silent about this. So the TED thing actually came, I think it's about 6 years ago
Yeah.
that they asked me to come on. There's maybe 7 or 8 years before that of work that kind of led up to that and how they found out about it. And just trying to contribute my verse, trying to do my part. I feel like in the grand orchestra of what's happening, I'm the triangle player. I'm like, the least, but every dun 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 ding, that's kind of my deal. So Ted came out of that, and a lot of things kind of opened from that,
Mhm.
and I'm still on it, still as much as I can, try to move the conversation forward, the perspective forward, and to serve. So so it's gone from ministry, which I never thought I would get into this side of it,
Uh-huh.
to really justice and fully realize dignity and equality for Black Americans, for all Americans, blah blah blah. So that's kind of in a nutshell. That's my 30-year journey.
Yeah, and talk about how the response has been because I know that I'm sure it got, one level of exposure when it first came out, but
Yeah.
in the time that we are right now, it seems like there's a resurgence of it again, and it's being passed around, and a lot of people that may have didn't see it the first time are getting an opportunity to kind of watch it now.
Yeah, it kind of crept around the 80,000 views for a long time.
Mhm.
And that was never my point. I was honored to even be asked. But late last year, October, November, people started sharing clips of it. And 5 minutes here, 6 minutes here, 4 minutes here. And I think there were like 7 million views of the clips. And I was like, what is this?
Yeah,
And people kept asking the same thing. How has this thing been hidden this long?
yeah,
Well, since March, it has grown again, and I think maybe 20,000 views a day, which is not a ton. But if I can get that many people to sit down and calmly think about what's being asked, think about the deeper implications, and when you see that it was 6 years ago, you think, well, he must have just started saying this, and sadly, it's as true today as it was when it was first released, and that is something. As a matter of fact, somebody reached out to me and said, "You said in the TED Talk, are we 5 years away or 10 years away?" They were like, "Well, it's been 6 years, and you might as well have said this yesterday." So that's good that I was right. Bad that I was right.
yeah, and I wanted to pull a few things from it, like please talk about like the Rick Ross situation because that was one that really hit home with me because I work in entertainment, and so I remember when he lost his deal with Reebok, but never looked at it from the perspective that you gave. So
Yeah. So
about that.
so it's what I call corporate dissociative disorder, where we can trivialize the value of Black life, kind of continuing several hundred-year old scripts, and it kind of hides in a blind spot. So in the Rick Ross situation, is UOENO, you only know it, and
Yeah,
he was talking about I think I put Molly in her drink and she didn't even know it,
yes,
and the internet flipped out, the Twitter sphere flipped out. How dare this guy trivialize date rape? And Reebok fired him because these lyrics are not coherent with the values of our brand. And I
yeah,
wrote Reebok, petitioned Reebok, every way I could to go, you know what? You hired him fully aware that his content trivialized romanticize the idea of blackness and criminality being associated, blackness and hypersexuality being associated. I don't know him. I don't know anything about him. He does not seem like the criminal type to me
Yeah.
at all. Maybe he is. He seems like, and again, if I'm offending somebody, I don't mean to, that a script has been issued to him for a part they wanted him to play. And as
Yeah.
Reebok said, well, we need black customers, let us fish with black bait. In their mind, the criminalized, hypersexualized image of a young black male is what they considered black bait. But when
Yeah.
he made a reference to date rape, I think, and it's been a while, there were 100,000 signed petitions to Reebok within 24 hours or 48 hours. And it was like, this is more than a song. You know, you can
Yeah.
call it a song, but it's more than a song. But no one even heard anything about murder, anything. And it's like, that's
Right.
what makes it normal. It's like, well, yeah, that's normal, but this bothers us. And I
Yeah.
realized that there are certain things that bothers us and certain things we consume in the marketplace that we don't give a second thought about, that
Hmm.
it shouldn't be normal at all. So that's kind of where that came from. And there were so many incidents around the same time. Of course, I don't know if you're familiar with Lil Wayne and Future did the remix of Karate Chop.
Yes.
And he talked about he hit it up like Emmett Till, and there was all this
Huh?
blowback. And then Sony apologized. They were like, look, we did not approve the remix version. We would never have done that. But the original version is about the murder of young black men and keeping
You're
a
right.
chopper. And so it's like Sony didn't even know what to apologize for. But
Yeah.
really, it's a result of brand violence. And that's what the TED Talk is about, that the marketplace is the canary in the coal mine, that if you watch the marketplace, it'll tell you the general attitudes of the nation. And when the market reacts, they're saying, we don't think our brand can survive being associated with this content. But
Yeah.
branding young black males as criminals is something that the vast majority of brands can still survive by until recently, because I can't think of a brand who has not come out on the side of
Hmm.
acknowledging and validating the value of black life. So what that's telling you is their brand cannot survive silence. But for a lot of years, it went on.
Yeah, and going back to music and how when it affects you know white people in a different way, then it's always a problem. Like when we constantly watch movies where there's violence, but when NWA drops an album and then white kids start doing
Hmm.
crimes or anything like that, and then they try to blame it, or whether it's a Tupac lyric or whatever it is,
Sure.
not a problem until white kids start killing each other or doing some kind of crimes.
Yeah. So again, it's this dissociation. It's almost like, well, black artists talking about it, white owned companies branding it for their youngest black audiences that
Hmm.
whites consume, whites being 75% of all the record buying public. Of course, whites consume it. But for me, I'm trying to be respectful of who you are, et cetera. But for me, this goes back to, and I hesitate to say this, but it just the Beastie Boys, which is a very interesting thing because
Yeah.
so it was Run DMC, Walk This Way. This kind of comes on in the 80s. Then
Hmm.
they had like the Fat Boys and some other things that really got some hits. And this is, in the late 80s now, or mid late 80s.
Yeah.
And when I heard the Beastie Boys for the first time as a young white kid growing up in basically an all white world, it was
Yeah.
the first time I ever heard any sort of criminality trivialized.
Yeah.
The feds are tapping my phone because I'm out on bail and all this other kind of stuff. And it's these, kids that really aren't I don't suppose criminal in any way, but they're being issued an imitation. Like, hey, what if white kids do this? And this now License to Ill opens the white customer of my age range
Yeah.
huge consumption of this. And
Yeah.
so it was normalized that this music and criminality are associated. So if you listen to kind of the evolution of Just Ice, the evolution of even NWA, I mean, at first the dope man was an enemy, but
Right.
slowly it started to turn, and nobody, and Two Live Crew, etc. Nobody considered, okay, we should be celebrating artist freedom, but
Yeah.
have we noticed that it's tilting to fulfill these dysfunctional racial scripts that we give out? And so that is the cultural dissociative disorder, and it's like a tree falls in the woods and no one can even hear that there would be something wrong with it. But
Right.
school shootings, songs about that, they get taken seriously. Songs about date rape, you could never go on radio and talk about I shot my dog or I
Yeah.
put my dog in dogfighting. You would be crucified. But there's a deafness when it comes to the triviality of or glorification or minimization of
Yeah.
violence towards young blacks. So
Yeah.
and the
And
beat goes on.
yeah, and taking it back to even the dog fighting, like the way that
Yes.
Michael Vick was scrutinized and thrown in jail for killing dogs, but you never hear, but take a Kaepernick just protesting against police violence, and he's thrown out. You know what I mean? Like it's
Hmm.
crazy how much America values animals, but not the black life.
I'll do you one bigger than that. Certainly not bigger than Kaepernick or Michael Vick, but I found a situation where Heineken
Hmm.
um, there's a poster, a huge banner over a dogfight. Looked like it was sponsored by Heineken.
Yeah,
And Heineken freaked out and was like, we had nothing to do with this, et cetera. It turns out they had promoted a concert in that same venue the weekend before. The concert left. They never took the poster down. So it looked like Heineken was sponsoring dogfighting. And immediately, Heineken felt the need to distance their brand from that. We would never want to be associated with that.
yeah,
But what would they sponsor that would trivialize the value of Black life, et cetera? So in the talk, I show Dr. King standing in front of a Montgomery bus boycott
yeah,
bus with a Pepsi symbol on it. And of course, right now, Pepsi would look back and go, yeah, we probably shouldn't have had our brand associated with that. But back then, that was normal. The idea that blacks were second-class citizens, that they would have to sit in different places, it was so normalized, your brand could survive supporting it. But Pepsi could never get away with that now. And we're seeing little by little the things that we could get away with issuing these scripts, these racially
yeah,
defined scripts that support dysfunction. You're not able to get away with it as much anymore. So I'm hoping that because the marketplace changes,
yeah,
it's evidence possibly that our values are changing. But really, it could be a response to violence, which is my biggest issue. That the soul of the power structure in this nation is not conditioned to respond to morality. They're conditioned to respond to violence. And
yeah,
even Dr. King and a lot of the nonviolent SCLC, et cetera, um, um, they call that nonviolence. It was non-retaliatory. It was non-terroristic, but it
yeah,
was violence by disruption. It was economic violence because
yeah,
that's what the soul of the power structure listens to. Schools were not integrated by free will. They were integrated at gunpoint. Slavery wasn't ended by a revelation of morality. It was ended through violence. And
yeah,
I'm pleading maybe for the soul of the power structure to open its eyes and ears, and maybe by changing based on a moral revelation, they won't be sitting down on the outside, but still standing up on the inside. And I'm trying to chip away and break down that.
yeah. And even with the situations now, companies are coming out and and saying that Black lives do matter. But it's like, are they doing that because they feel morally that they need to fix something, or are they doing that to save the bottom line? And it
That's
seems
it.
much that they're just about saving the bottom line because
Yeah.
of the purchasing power.
Yeah. And really, how many incidents have we had similar to George Floyd? I mean, so many. And I'm not trying to minimize. I do believe hearts are open that have never been open before. I don't want to minimize that we're making ground or we're making progress. At least I hope so. But Babylon, and forgive me, I don't try to be over spiritual, but Babylon, the mammon system, the idea that money drives everything.
Hmm.
We have no idea if Roger Goodell has had a change of heart or not.
Yeah,
All we know is that their testing and surveys said our brand can survive distancing ourselves from Kaepernick until it could not. So he
yeah,
says, man, now I get it. But there's a scripture that says, bring forth fruits fit for repentance. If you really get it, then demonstrate by these actions. And that's what we have yet to see. So I don't know. Has Clinique or Old Navy, have they changed their values?
yeah,
Or are they responding to violence that they know their brand cannot survive? And if we're making decisions based on the dignity of all people,
yeah,
moral decisions, then our soul may have hope. But if it's only what mammon, what money dictates, what the market dictates should happen, then it's rinse and repeat.
yeah.
Let's calm down. Let's get. But I try not to be a pessimist. I'm hopeful, but we've been burned before.
Yeah, and that's why, like, I saw a meme that said NASCAR has done more for Bubba Wallace and things like that in like a week than the NFL has done for
Yeah,
Kaepernick in years. And
yeah,
and for NASCAR, their core audience is about the Confederate flag and is about all of that. So for them to actually ban the Confederate flag and stand with their driver in this way, like, it actually shows me that it's about more than money in a sense to them.
sure,
They
sure, because
have
they
to,
didn't have to. They didn't have to change.
yes,
Right, right. I agree with you, and I'm I think honestly, though, it's the farthest ends of the spectrum that control the conversation. I really think the vast majority of people are citizens of goodwill. They know the problems are complex, and this thing on the Confederate flag, it's moving. It's unnecessary. It's complex history, but it's really not complex at all. It's you're either championing what was right or championing what was evil. So that I part I understand. But NASCAR has moved, and they really, of any brand was in the power in the sports thing not to have to move. They were really, so I have hope again, and I try not to just be down all the time to think that there's never. So I choose to believe that in the power structure, the needle may have moved. I want to see it keep moving, and bit by bit is great. There's a concept called gradualism, which was opposed and still should be opposed. It's like, well, we'll get there eventually, but at the cost of how many over time? And so to me, somebody needs to be in Roger Goodell's ear saying, here are the 5 ways you can demonstrate that you're serious. But if Roger Goodell says, I've looked at these, what does the market say? It's continually moving by mammon. And to me, in my worldview, that is what human beings will face in judgment. Do the powerful exercise their power on behalf of the powerless? That to me is the core message of Jesus Christ. What will the powerful do on behalf of the powerless? Because the whole concept is that God is powerful, and look what he did on behalf of the powerless. So in inserting that in the marketplace with Roger Goodell, all these people who profess Christ, all these people who profess to care about their players. I mean, in the NFL, the NBA, how can you not move on behalf of the core of your entire economic model? But I'm telling you, the fans, the people that can afford the seats, the tickets, they're pulsing them, and that is the wrong way to go. And I believe that will be what happens on Judgment Day when Babylon is judged, the system of money that controlled morals. And again, I know you didn't call me on here to preach, but that is what I think is happening. I think that's what's happening is that all of us, a guy said this, and I know I'm trying to respect time. A guy said this to me. He says, I look at these pictures in 1910 of a lynching with like 700 people standing under the body, strange fruit, right? He says people brought their kids, their wives, everybody's just staring at it. And he says, how can we be in 1910 having the same conversation in 2020? I said, that I can't answer, but here's what I can answer. No generation of people will say they did not have a chance to get on the side of right. So in 1910, you had a choice to do right and to be on the side of right or the side of wrong. And here we are in 2020, everybody's being presented with a chance. Everybody within the power structure can chime their voice in with the oppressed or chime their voice in with the oppressor. I hate to say it's black and white. It is black and white. It is that simple.
Yeah. And even speaking of like the systematic racism, companies will say that they stand behind the Black Lives Matter movement for the dollar. But if you look at their board of directors, if you look at their executives, if you look at, things like this, you don't really see that they have any kind of diversity. Even when you talk about the NFL has still been going back and forth trying to figure out how to fix the Rooney Rule.
Right.
But it's like, it's getting worse. It seems like they had more black coaches before the Rooney Rule than they have since, almost.
Yeah, to me, if we're going to err, we need to err on the side of on the weak or the powerless, those who have been marginalized. What we do sometimes, not all people, I can't speak for all white people, that's too big of a broom, but sometimes we hesitate waiting for context. Can't believe we see what we're seeing. Surely it can't be as simple as the video. And that hesitation creates the suspicion, the fear that there will not be any recognition, not be any pursuit of justice, etc. So in my opinion, the opposite of dysfunction is, I think this is Dr. Phil said this, the opposite of dysfunction is dysfunction. We may pendulum from complete apathy on justice for Black Americans to overreaction and depriving people of due process in certain things. I think that's wrong, but I think it's moving in a direction where instead of saying, well, we don't know, let's see, which perpetuates the devaluing, now people may be acting too fast. But that's what I'm saying about the NFL. Overact. And I don't understand. I don't get how President Trump and Colin Kaepernick, that nobody in the room was smart enough to unite them together. The entire Republican idea, if you go to any Trump rally, I've never been, you look at them on TV, they all wear, don't tread on me, keep your government hands off me. That is what Kaepernick was saying. Do not infringe upon my rights as a citizen. And
Right.
how Kaepernick wasn't anti-law enforcement. He was calling for more law enforcement. Somebody enforce the laws concerning us as citizens.
Yeah.
And everybody misses each other until the marketplace says, you better respond. So hopefully people are in Commissioner Goodell's ears saying, look, if we're going to make a bad decision, let's make a bad decision on the good side. If we're going to be wrong, let's be wrong with a right heart. And that stuff will sort it out. But so much now we're like, well, what about the wins? What about the economics? What about this? If that's what's driving you, you're going to make a wrong decision 90% of the time.
Yeah. And thank you so much for your time. I'm
Oh,
going to
man.
get you out of here on this last one. So what are you currently working on, and how can, the we as an audience, how can we support? Do you have a book out, or, I know I see a lot of things that you do with Creflo Dollar and different things.
Yeah.
So how can we
Yeah.
support?
Well, I hate to, again, be over spiritual. Pray for me. If you're a person of prayer, pray for me. Right now, we're moving into some political things because I'm not convinced that there's an answer in the current setup as the two-party system, but also just really trying to get the power structure to consider maybe a different perspective. I was raised in a lot of ugliness, and trying to cleanse myself from that and then share the ugliness of my journey in hopes that somebody might come to the light. That's where I'm at right now. And then some other things, hopefully in September, October, they'll be coming out. And I think that may be all I can say for now. So other than that, just thank you. Thank you just for giving me 5 minutes to talk, man. I appreciate it. And your kind words really mean a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, and how do people connect with you? I know you have a site, a YouTube. I love the talks that you and your wife.
Oh, yeah. So yeah,
Hello.
so you can find me of course on Instagram at Mike Loves Connie. You can follow me there on Facebook, Michael Tyler Smith. Also, my YouTube site is just Michael Smith. Yeah, it's hard to find. There's a million of them. But yeah, that's just my wife and I taking the clumsy things, the things we believe will be helpful in the clumsy way we present them, and hopefully they move people's lives forward. But yeah, we deal with married sex, we deal with racism, we deal with corporate purity. I mean, there's all sorts of things that we deal with, and a little bit of everything. A little bit of everything.
Yeah, and I love your perspective and how you grew up as, being called White Mike and everything.
Oh yeah. I've been called everything. I've been called a wigger and Willie Lynch. So I can't figure out. I've been called all of it. I mean, every hateful thing you can think to say. I've been called, and I'm like, well, I can't be. Somebody says you forgot you're white. I can't have forgotten I'm white and be Willie Lynch in the same statement. Pick a lane. So anyway, I don't know.
Yeah, and I love your Christian background as well. My dad is a pastor, so
Okay, cool. All
yeah,
right.
so definitely no problem with you preaching here.
All
So,
right. Well,
but
I believe today's issues in America are the result of a widespread failure of the pulpit, because people who claim Christ did not speak for Christ. Not all,
yeah,
but that's why I think we got in the situation we have. And a lot of people raised in church don't even know what's going on as evil, because failure in the pulpit reinforced the dysfunction that we have. And so I'm trying to do my part there to kind of say, hey, this is a result of bad preaching, but we can change it maybe by preaching the right stuff to the right people.
gotcha. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate you and your perspective, and I'll continue to, share your TED Talk with the people around me and things like that. And if you have anything you ever need for me to post or promote, definitely reach out to me as well.
You're very kind. Peace on you and yours. Thank you so much. Stay healthy, and thank you for the love. And we'll connect.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.